Okay, so, hello everybody.
Amen.
Yeah. Praise God. Yeah, let's give a hand clap for God today, because He's the one. Today I will be teaching on the book of Numbers. And before I get started, though, I have something for Pastor from the book of Numbers. And as we were learning earlier about Balaam and Balak, we were talking about curses. And this one's for Pastor and this is for the church. But the Bible says, this is talking about Balaam, and it says, and he took his parable and said unto Balak, the king of Moab, hath brought me from Aram out of the mountains of east, saying, come, curse me, Jacob, and come, defy Israel. And Balaam's response to this was, how shall I curse whom God hath not cursed? And that's for you in the church, because it doesn't matter how many curses people put on this church. They cannot curse the people of God, because God has not cursed this church. So that's what God had put my spirit to tell you. But
where was it at?
What's that?
What was the scripture?
Oh, on Numbers chapter 23, verses I think 7 and 8. Hang on.
Numbers 23, 7 and 8.
Yeah. Let me double check that. Make sure of that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, 7 and 8. Okay. So basically, I took some stuff from what I learned in class the other day and put in the outline. But for those of you who have a Thompson chain and would like to delve a little bit deeper into the study of numbers, or just the outline of numbers, you can look it up. The Thompson chain is 4226. That's the book outline. This book was written by Moses to the people of Israel. The Hebrew name for the book of Numbers is Bamidbar. Is that how you pronounce it? Bamidbar, which means in the desert. The name Numbers derives from the census that was taken in chapters 1 and chapters 26. The book was written around 1405 BC. The main theme was the pilgrimage, because obviously they had the pilgrimage through from Mount Sinai all the way to Moab. Jericho was it was close to Jericho and the Jordan. The events that took place was about 39 years. It spanned from 1444 BC to about 1405. And the key scripture is Numbers 33:1. And it says, these are the journeys of the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Egypt with their armies under the hand of Moses and Aaron. But if you really want to condense Numbers down to... Moses really was a journalist. I'm finding out he journaled everything. And if you really want to condense book of Numbers, just go to Numbers chapter 33, because it just tells you every place that he went, from all the way from Egypt all the way down to all the way to the Jordan before they crossed over. There were 3 divisions within the book of Numbers, and that was obviously leaving Mount Sinai. Chapters 1 through 10. They traveled from Mount Sinai to Kadesh. Chapters 10 verses 11 through chapter 20. And then Kadesh to Moab, which was chapters 21 through 36. Now we had 3 types of Christ within the book itself, but the Thompson suggested one more. So those types of Christ was Aaron's rod, when his was the only rod that blossomed out of the rods that were chosen. The brazen serpent, which we all know, Jesus even quotes it when he was lifted up, as the brazen serpent was lifted up in the wilderness. The rock in which Moses broke, for the water to cry out. And we all know that Jesus says, I am the living water, And the cities of refuge, which the people, manslayers, went to if they killed somebody by accident, unknowing they went to. The Israelites had to choose 6 different cities from their from the land that they've inherited. And what happens is that if they killed somebody, they could flee to that city until the high priest dies. And then when the high priest dies, they can go back to their original city. It's something that God ordained and set up. So and that's what he commanded Moses. The purpose of the book was to preserve God's patience towards Israel and demonstrate God's mercy from punishing Israel so severely for their sin. And there were 2 contributions that the book of Numbers made, and that was to show the census being taken to form a military within Israel. And the book contributed to the fact that Israel was rebellious, but God's mercy, God had mercy on his people. Starting with chapter 1, it begins, basically God is commanding Moses to number the people. And at that point, Moses had to number the people because he was separating them for war. And they took the males of 20 years old or older, and the Levites were not numbered among them because God wanted them to be separated. So, and then chapter 2 basically boiled down is you get Moses numbering the people again, but for a different purpose. He wanted them to split up into their different tribes. And so, obviously you got 12 tribes of Israel, and God wanted them to be split up, pitched to tents. So when, my guess is when the land was divided, they could, just take their family and go to the land that was split for them. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to be honest, I couldn't get all the chapters down. I couldn't get all the information, so I'm just going to give you bits and pieces of what I do have. In chapter 3, this is when God separates the Levites. And I found something interesting. I didn't know it to this day. It didn't hit me, actually, just didn't contemplate. But found out that Moses is actually a Levite, and so was Aaron. And Aaron was separated, obviously, for the priesthood. And it didn't click with me. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, Moses is a Levite. I didn't know that. So,
Wow.
But the Levites were separated for one reason alone. They were to do the work. First, Aaron was to do the work of the priesthood and his sons. And what happened was that the Levites were also separated to do the work of the tabernacle. And chapter 4 talks all the way about that. They had different duties to do for the tabernacle. And I didn't get the chance to get to all of it, but they were to make the tent so that they were to form the bowls and the instruments that would be used, especially Aaron, the priest, would use some of these so that he would, when he offers sacrifices, the tools would be used. So obviously, and then some were consecrated or separated so that they would carry the tabernacle from place to place. And when they would set it up, and they would dwell in a place when God came down in a pillar of a cloud, they would not move. When God was in the tabernacle, they would not move. But when God was out of the tabernacle, he would lift up, and then at that point they would move. So that could be another reason why it took 40 years for them to dwell in the wilderness, because God dwelt obviously among them, basically, when in the tabernacle. And that's when you find a lot of time that he was speaking to Moses. We skip down to chapter 12. At this point, this is when Aaron and Miriam were very mad at Moses because they said in their hearts, they're like, is Moses the only one that actually hears from God? I mean, we're prophet, or God speaks to us too, and so they got mad, and so God wasn't happy with that, and so he called them three in, Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. He called them into the tabernacle, and he spoke unto Aaron and Miriam, and he says, my prophets, I will speak to them. I forget the exact word, but he said, with Moses, I will speak to you face to face. I will speak to him face to face. And so, basically, he put a plague of leprosy on Miriam because of their disobedience and their unfaithfulness. And so, God's anger was kindled. He put a leprosy on there, and Miriam had to be without the camp. This is so cool. From what I learned is, this is the same thing as Jesus. Jesus died on the cross without the gate, and that means he had to leave Jerusalem and go out of Jerusalem. And so, same thing happened here. Anybody who is unclean had to leave the camp, and they had to leave for a period of 7 days, up to 7 days, and she left for 7 days, and she had to put on the third and the seventh day the water of separation, and that's a purifying thing for them. So they the camp did not move for 7 days until her leprosy was cleansed.
Wow.
Okay, in chapter 13. We find that God has commanded Moses to send 12 spies into the land, and into the land of Canaan, to be exact. And so the names they give the names of the people that went, their father's name, which suggests the tribe they've come from, or no, I'm sorry, the father's name and then their tribe. So the 12 people that went are Shemua, Shaphat, Caleb, Egal, and I found something interesting, Oshea, which is actually Joshua. I didn't know that before, so I studied that out a little bit, and I found out that Hebrew translation, Oshea, is actually another name for Joshua. I didn't know that. And so we got Oshea, Palti, Gadil, Gadi, Amil, Sether, Nabi, and Gaol, and they were sent into the land of Canaan. And everybody knows that they searched out the land, and they found it to be fruitful and good, but when they got there, they found the Amalekites. Now, everybody knows that the Amalekites are giants in the land, and so they came back after 40 days of being in the land, and so they came back and they gave their report, and they said, oh, well, this land does flow with milk and honey. It's very prosperous, it's very good, but they gave a bad report because the giants were in the land, and they were afraid to fight them. They were afraid to take them. And so, with that being said, Caleb and Joshua, they stilled the people and said, let's go possess it. They were the only two that said, let's go possess it. And everybody else was like, no, we can't. There's Amalekites. We're afraid. And so for that, God said for every day that they were in the land of Canaan, that's how long they had to wander in the wilderness. So they were in there for 40 days. And so for every day representing 1 year, they were in 40 years in the wilderness. And so all that because they gave an evil report. Okay, we're going to skip down to chapter 21. I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch my breath. The king of the Canaanites, whose name was Arad, came up against Israel, and the king and his people, they took some of those Israelites prisoners. And this is what I find funny about Israel, is because sometimes they could be on point, and they're following the Lord, they're trusting in the Lord. At this point, they did. They were trusting in the Lord, and they were kind of mad at the king, and they were like, Lord, we're gonna go get these people back. And so they did. They went to the land of Canaan. They fought. They got the prisoners back, and because the Lord they gave them the okay, He said, yeah, go for it. And He said they went and utterly destroyed the Canaanites. They destroyed them, and with their cities, all their cities are destroyed. So they kept traveling. At this point, they were traveling to Mount Hor, by the Red Sea, and they were compassing the land of Edom. And so, at this point, the Israelites became really discouraged, and they were murmuring, and they were bickering, and things like that. And this is when they're not on point. They're not on point no more. So they're like, sometimes they can be okay, and then sometimes they can't. So they started complaining against God and Moses, and they were, as a result, this is when God sends His fiery serpents into the land. And what the fiery serpents did was, if they bit you, you died. And they said the Bible says they bit much people. They didn't give a number, but they bit a lot of people, and so they died. But later on, they confessed, you know what? We sinned. We're sorry. Forgive us. And so God said, all right, make yourself a brazen serpent and raise it up. And He says, if a snake bites you, then look at the brazen serpent, and it'll heal you, or God will heal you, or you won't die. And so that's what they did. And I know that the brazen serpent, the actual thing that was lifted up in the wilderness, was destroyed, but they have a replica. I looked it up. Actually, I was trying to look up Mount Nebo, but this came up, and I thought it was a cool picture. They actually got an image of what it might have looked like back in the day, and I think it's pretty cool. I'll show it to you guys later, but it looks really cool. But they also had a couple pictures of what it looks like present day off of Mount Nebo, and basically it looked like all desert. All desert. It probably doesn't look like what it did back then when Moses looked at it. Okay. So when they looked at the pole, or the brazen serpent, they did not die. At the end of that chapter, basically, they were warring against many kings, or many people. They traveled to many different places. They came to King Sihon, and the Amorites and the Israelites decimated them. They decimated all the people, and they dwelt in their cities after they killed the Amorites. And they went to another king, and they fought him. His name is King Bashan of Og.
King Og, right?
Yeah, King of Bashan of Og, yeah. And they took their land as well. And so they settled into the land of Moab. So now they're really close to this point at the Jordan. The Jordan is, after they cross the Jordan, they get their inheritance. And so they settled in the land of Moab by Jericho. And now this is where we get to Balak. Balak is the king of the Moabites, and he this is the people that Israelites took and fornicated with the women and the daughters of the Moabites. So Balak was scared at this point because he saw that they had favor, and the Israelites had favor because of God. They killed the Amorites, and they were afraid. All of Moab was pretty much afraid of the Israelites. And so at this point, Balak sent some messengers out to Balaam. And the messengers basically went there to ask Balaam to come and curse Israel. And at first Balaam was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Because he went and he prayed. God said, no, you're not going. Don't curse them. And so he came and he told the messengers, he said, you know what? This is what God said. I'm not going to do it. I refuse to go. And so the messengers came back to Balak, and Balak was wroth. He was mad. And what happened was that he sent them again. He was like, all right, this time tell him I got some riches for him. I got some honor for him. I'm going to put him on a pedestal, basically, and he's going to be of a person of high reputation. And so he sent the messengers back down. They told him that, and he was like, let me go pray again. And so God said this time he could go. So this time he went, and he was riding on a donkey. And I didn't get, until Pastor mentioned it earlier in another class, it just clicked in my mind that I think this was a test for Balaam. This was definitely a test for Balaam. Who do you love more? Your riches, your honor, or do you love me? And even though God gave the go-ahead for Balaam to go to Balak, I think it was a test, and if he would have went, he would have been in sin. And if he didn't go, then he would have done the right thing. And so what happened was he did go. Everybody knows the story. He had a donkey that he was riding, and God wasn't happy with him. And so what God did was he sent down an angel with a sword. And the objective of the angel was to kill Balaam. He was going to literally kill him. But what happened was the donkey, is so funny, got spiritual insight, and he saw the angel. Amen. And what happened was he kept turning, and as I gathered from the reading, when he was turning, the space became more and more confined to a point where at one point the donkey was turning and crushed Balaam's foot up against the wall. And so he kept smacking the donkey. He's like, why are you turning? Why are you turning? So he kept smacking. But at this point, Balaam was not seeing the angel. He did not perceive the angel at all, just the donkey was. And so it got to a point where the space was just so confined that the donkey couldn't turn around, so he just laid there. And again, Balaam beat the donkey, and then God used the donkey to speak. And the donkey was like, why have you been beating me these last 3 times? And he's like, and the donkey was like, I've been with you all my life, and I was born, and you raised me, blah, blah, blah. And finally, that's when Balaam's eyes were open to the angel. And the angel started talking to him. He's like, I was sent to kill you, but because of this donkey, he's pretty much saved your life, And so Balaam repented, but he still went anyway to Balak. He went to Balak, and at that point, he went to Balak, and he set up 7 altars, which I think is cool because we all know what the number 7 means. It's completeness, So I thought that was kind of cool. But on each altar, actually he didn't build the altars. It was Balak. Balaam told Balak to make the altars. So Balak made the altars, but Balaam sacrificed a ram on each and a bullock on each. He sacrificed 7 of each type of animal. And so after he was done sacrificing, he was taken to a place by Balak, and he was like, curse Israel. And then Balaam went to pray. at least 2 times he went to pray, and each time he got a parable, and that was one. The parable I just read was one of the parables that was given by God, and he said, "How can I curse a people who God has not cursed? You know, how do you expect me to do that?" And Balak wasn't happy with that answer, and so he took him to another place, and he was like, he did the same thing. He built an altar, or built 7 altars again, and he sacrificed, and then he took him. He said, "Let me show you this place. Go look over there. You see that? Go curse Israel." And he was like, "Let me go pray." God gave him another parable.
Oracle.
And excuse me?
It's oracle, not parable.
Oracle?
Yeah. I give them oracles.
Oh, my Bible said parables.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oops. Okay. And so he spoke again, and he said, "No, I'm not going to curse Israel." And so he was Balak was getting madder and madder as Balaam kept telling him that. So for the last time, for the 3rd time that Balak asked Balaam to curse Israel, he didn't have to go and pray because God gave him a prophecy. And chapter 24 of Numbers, it says that he spoke a prophecy to Balak, and basically what the prophecy was first of all, it was about Israel and the happiness of Israel, because God was God, of Israel. He was the God of Israel, and so Israel would prosper, and even though it was kind of funny to me, even though they were rebellious and doing everything wrong, God still said, "You know what? I'm going to bless them, and I'm going to use them, and they will be my people, and I will be their God." Basically that's what he was saying. And so that's what happened. But he also had a prophecy against Balak and Balaam, and he said that they will fall. And the king of Asher in, I think it was Edom at the same time, and he was talking to how they were going to fall and they were going to be killed because of them wanting to to kill Israel or curse Israel. So at this point, he gave the prophecy, and then he went home. Because Balak was like, "You know what? Just go away, flee from me right now, and just go away. Return back to your place. Obviously you're not going to do what I want you to do." And so he did. He flew after he prophesied against Balak and all the people. He returned back home. And so after this, after God, was happy with or said that Israelites will be happy, at this point the Israelites had settled in Shittim. Is that how you say it? Shittim? Okay. And they started committing whoredoms with the daughters of Moab. And so there was also worshiping of a god named Baal Peor. And so Moses wasn't too happy with it. And so God commanded Moses to hang them by their heads and let them be hung against the sun to the east, so that his anger would go away. So, and then he was told, Moses was told to tell the judges to hang or to kill any person that joined themselves with the god Baal Peor. And so the judges had killed them as well. And so it's funny, as God was mad and they were doing all this, one guy came with a Midianitish woman, and it was in the sight of the congregation and Moses. It was right before him. This is like didn't hit him, didn't hit him in the head. And so Phineas, one of the priests, took a javelin, and so the Midianitish woman and one of the Israelites went into the tent, and Phineas took a javelin and he thrust them through. He just killed them right there, because obviously God was mad. There was a plague that was, I think there was a plague that was going on. Is this the one? Yeah. Because of the actions, God put a plague on them, but because Phineas put a javelin through it, stopped the plague from spreading, and that plague killed about 24,000 people. So God's righteous judgment will prevail. You could tell from that, and that's not the only time that the plague happened. Even Miriam, but God was merciful with Miriam. But here, 24,000 people of Israel had died because of the whoredoms they had committed. And so, because of Phineas's actions, God actually made a covenant with him, a covenant of peace, and the priesthood would reign from him and his kinsmen forever. He was, because of his zealousness for his God, he was zealous for God, and he wanted to do the right thing, and so God blessed him for it and made that covenant. And I don't know why. I'd have to study more into it, but they did give the name of the person that brought the Midianitish woman in, and they gave the Midianitish woman's name too. And the man that brought the Midianitish woman in, his name was Zimri, and her name was Cosby. I don't know how to exactly pronounce it. And so at the end of the chapter, we find that God commanded Moses to vex the Midianites and just kill them all, because of Peor's sake. Chapter 26 of Numbers. This is another census that was taken, and we find that God commanded Eleazar, the son of Aaron, he's the second in command of the priest, who he commanded them to take a census of the Israelites again, who was 20 years older, 20 years old or older, so that they can go to war again. And as Pastor said in an earlier class last week, that their fathers had died in the wilderness, and so these are the children of the Israelites who had not, who are the children now of the people that died. And so God told how they were to divide the land by their fathers, by their lots, and according to their fathers, and that's about it for that chapter. Basically, it's just the census in that chapter. That's what it mainly dealt with. In chapter 27, the daughters of Zelophehad, if that's Zelophehad, I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, Zelophehad. I'm sorry, it's hard to pronounce. They came unto Moses and they said, "Well, our father died in his own sin. He died, and that wasn't our fault." So the daughters came, and they were like, "So do we still get a possession?" And Moses sought God on it, and he said, "Yeah, they're right. They do get a possession." And so at this point, God made a law to say, okay, if a father dies, then the son would get the land. But if the son dies, then it would go to the daughter. But if the daughter, or not the son dies, but if they don't have a son, if they have a daughter, it would go to the daughter. And it kept going all the way up until their father's family, because it was just a kinsman. It would just keep going down, because the whole idea was to keep the land within Israel. And so they wanted to make sure it stayed with Israel. So they would pass it down to kinsmen, so it would stay within the possession of Israel. And at this point, God commanded Moses to go on top of Mount Abiram, because that's where he was to die. He was not allowed to take possession of the land of Israel because his disobedience for tapping the rock twice, and so he was to die there. But there was still much more that Moses had to do. So since Moses was commanded to go up by the Lord to Mount Abiram, he said, well, Lord, there's nobody to lead these people. He said, these people are going to be leaderless. And he said, okay. So he commanded Moses to put his hands on, or go down to the priest, Eliezer, and put his hands on Joshua, which is the son of Nun. And he said, this will be your leader. And so that's what they did. They brought him before Eliezer, and then they brought him before the congregation of Israel. And they, God told him this, he told Moses, your honor will be on Joshua. And so he would be the next leader of the people of Israel. And so Moses went up to Mount Abiram, and he got to see the land. He got to see the land before he died. And he was after that, he was gathered to his people, just like his brother Aaron was. Okay, so I'm guessing this took place before Moses died, because chapter 28 says that he commanded, he went over the sacrifices again with Moses. Basically, he was saying, that's what 28 and 29 deal with. Chapters 28 and 29 deal with the sacrifices again, and their feasts and things like that they were to hold, they were to hold to, according to God. And so one of the offerings was the bread sacrifice, which was to be offered with fire. And also, they had to follow a schedule of offerings, because there's sin offering, the peace offering, the wave offering, things like that. So, and they had to do it on specific days and specific times of the year, so that they, depending on when God commanded. Okay, chapter 30 basically dealt with vows of the people. What God commanded man was, for a man who made a vow, no matter what circumstance was, that vow had to stand. Okay, so if you said, I swear, blah, 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 that stood. But if a woman would swear an oath, or a vow, then it depended on what happened. If, let's say, a girl, 16, 17, makes a vow, and she was in her father's house, and she makes a vow before the Lord, but he would agree with it, so he would hold his peace, and so he would say nothing, and so that oath stood with that girl. But on the other token, if the father heard the vow and didn't approve of it, he would not hold his peace. He would say, no, 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 no. And then at that point, the woman would not be held to that vow or oath. And so the Bible says that if a man didn't hold his peace, then the Lord would forgive her, and that vow wouldn't stand, basically. But, and then it went on to say, if a lady who was married had a husband and she made a vow and he held his peace, then that vow would stand. Or the same thing, if he disagreed with the vow, then it wouldn't stand. But if a woman was widowed, then the vow, no matter what vow she made, it would have to stand because there was nobody there to witness. So that was basically, it was just talking about vows and oaths that if we made, we would have to keep them, or if a lady made it and the circumstance it was depending. And so, chapter 31, God commanded Moses to go against the Midianites, and he readied them for war. And now this is cool because he took 1,000 from each tribe, which we know is there's 12 tribes, so that means 12,000 men, and they went to war. And this is going back to just giving a little bit more insight into the what happened with the Midianites. Remember, with the Midianitish woman and the man. Well, this is giving a little bit more insight of that event and what happened and the results of because of that event. They went to war with the Midianites, and they spoiled all the male, or they killed all the males, the male children, and they spoiled them basically. They brought their cattle, their flocks, their goods, brought everything back, and the women. And this is what happened. This is why Balaam was killed with the sword, because they had committed whoredoms with the daughters of the Midianites. And so they took the women back, and they took the children. Yeah, they took the children. I'm sorry, they took the children back with the goods and everything, and they brought it back unto Moses. And so Moses was there. He was going to go meet them. He went to go meet them. He went down, and they brought it back, and Moses looked, and he was like, "You brought the women back alive?" He wasn't too happy with them, because God commanded them to kill them, and they didn't do it. So Moses was mad, and that made God mad. And God wasn't too happy with the Israelites. And so he put a plague on them. He plagued them. And Moses had told them, all right, all the male children, they have to go. And every woman who had known a man, they had to go. But he said, every female child who didn't know a man, then that you can keep. So... So for their sin, Moses commanded, he said, all right, you've sinned. Or no, I'm sorry, they didn't, they were in sin, but he said, because you went to war, and the law states that if you are before a dead person or an unclean, at that point you're unclean. If you touched a dead person, so they've all been to war. So at this point, they had to dwell without the camp. And then on the third day and then the seventh day, they had to put their water of separation on them so that they could be purified. And so everything that had to be purified was everything that was plundered, meaning their silver, their brass, their gold, or anything of that nature that had to go through the fire, had to go get purified. And so they purified that, and they put on the water separation. And now at this point, they had to split everything. They had to split twice. One was for the Lord. They had to split their offering, and they had to give a portion of that to the Lord. And the other one was to go to the Levites. The Levites were to get some of that plunder as well, because obviously God has separated them, so they didn't go to war. Their job was for the tabernacle, but God said to them, yeah, you're still going to give to the Levites because they're still part of the congregation. And so that's what they did. They gave it all so they split it 2 ways, actually 3 ways, for the Lord, themselves, and the Levites. At this point, they were real close to chapter 32, they were close to the Jordan. They were real close to Jordan, and it looks like from this standpoint they were ready to cross. And so the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and a half tribe of Manasseh asked to stay behind. And Moses kind of critiqued them, because he said, "Do you see what the Lord has brought you from? And then two, you're going to go to the land of Israel, and He's commanded you that, you fight for this land. This is your land. You're inheriting it." And so he critiqued them on that. And what they wanted to stay behind on this side of Jordan, because they had many cattle, and the land was really good for the cattle. And so they asked Moses for the land, and Moses wasn't too happy about it, and so he told them no, but they compromised with him and said, "Okay, give us these cities on this side of Jordan, or give us this land on this side of Jordan. We'll build fenced cities for our children and our cattle, but we'll go over to fight." And he says, "We'll fight," or the Israelites said, "We'll fight until all the children get their land that God has given them for the inheritance." And so that's what they compromised, and Moses prayed on it, and the Lord said yes, and so he told them, "Okay, you can do that." And so what happens is they did that. But they had to swear the oath. They had to swear an oath, and basically he says he made them keep their oath, and he said, "If you don't keep this oath, your sin is upon you, and you know it. It'll come back to bite you in the butt," basically. And so they went and did that. In chapter 33, as I was saying earlier, this is really I think the crux of the book, because it tells of all their journeys, where they went. It was a lot. They traveled a whole lot. From the time they got out of Egypt until they crossed over, they were traveling a whole lot. Israelites left Egypt on the 15th day of the first month, the day after Passover, because obviously, the Passover came to them, and whoever had the blood on the lamppost or the doorpost, they passed over. And so they plundered the Egyptians, and then they left. I didn't get everything from the journeys. It was just way too much information. If my suggestion is, if you want to know their journeys, just read it, because it is amazing, but it's just way too much information to put on here. So but they went from Egypt all the way to Moab, and just read it. I just had to say that. Just read it, because it is an amazing chapter, but it was just way too much information to put on for here. Okay, in chapter 34, you're going to find out that this is when God commands Moses, telling him, "Okay, speak to the children of Israel. This is their portion of land." And so he divided the land up according to their tribes, and then he was saying stuff. All right, this tribe gets the stuff or the land in the north and the south, and so he even gives the dimensions, to the land they're going to get, because he said, I don't know how much a cubit length is, but he says the Levites will get 1,000 cubits of land, because obviously they get separate land. They will get a portion of the inheritance. And so, if you would turn to Numbers 34, chapter 34, verse 2, I'd like to read it to you. And it says, "This the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you come into the land of Canaan, this is the land which you shall fall unto you for an inheritance, even the land of Canaan,
with the coast thereof. Then your south quarter shall be from the wilderness of Zin, along by the coast of Edom. And your south border shall be the outmost coast of the salt sea eastward. And your border shall turn from the south to the ascent of Caribim, pass on to Zin, and going forth thereof shall be from the south to Kadesh Barnea, and shall go to Hazadar to pass over Asman. And the border shall fetch a compass from Asman unto the river of Egypt, and the goings out of it shall be to the sea. And as for the western border, you shall even have a great sea for a border, and shall be your west border, and this shall be your north border. From the great sea shall point out for you Mount Hor. From Mount Hor you shall point out your borders unto the entrance of Hamath, and going forth of the border shall be to Zedad, and the border shall go on to Ziphron, and the goings out of it shall be to Hazarenon. This shall be your north border. And you shall point out your east border from Hazarenon to Shepham. And the coast shall go down from Shepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain. And the border shall descend, it shall reach unto the side of the sea of Chinnereth eastward. And the border shall go down to the Jordan, and the goings about shall be to the salt sea. And that shall be the land which the coast thereof round about. And Moses commanded the children of Israel, saying, This is the land which you shall inherit by lot, which the Lord commanded to give unto the 9 tribes, and to the half tribe, which is Manasseh. And for the tribe of the children of Reuben, according to the house of their fathers, and the tribe of the children of Gad, according to the house of their fathers, have received their inheritance. And the half tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance. And the 2 tribes and the half tribe have received their inheritance on this side of Jordan, near Jericho, eastward toward the sun rising. So basically, it gave you the coast and the how far out the land would go, which I thought was kind of cool. So it kind of gives you an idea. I don't know what that would be present day, but it would be kind of cool to study that out and see where the land's kind of extended. Yeah. I think that would be a cool thing to do. And so, on top of that, God set princes over, not a princess like men, over the land of which they would rule, and there was one from each tribe. And so, the 10 princes that were chosen were Caleb, Shemuel, Elidad, Bukai, Hananiah, Kemuel, Elisaphan, Paltiel, Ahihad, and Pedahil. And these were the people that would rule each part of what God just gave to the people of Israel. And so I thought that was kind of cool. And this is where God commanded, chapter 35 is when God commanded Israel that, okay, you got your land, but now you have to divide it up with the Levites. And so the Levites were allowed to have 48 cities within the land that the Israelites had possessed. And 6 of those cities had to be a city of refuge. Now, God commanded that 3 cities be posted on this side of Jordan, which the Israelites were currently at, and then they had to have 3 on the other side of Jordan. And he says, and as I was explaining earlier, whenever a man kills somebody, that's where they flee to until the high priest would die and they could return back to the land. But it wasn't just for the Israelites. I found out it could be for strangers or anybody sojourning or traveling. So they were allowed to go into the cities as well. And
we're about run out of time, so if you just want to conclude then.
Okay. Well, basically I am at the end, so
okay.
God gave them the parameters for murder, and if anybody murdered anybody, the revenger could come and kill them. But they couldn't have any hatred towards them. They could, if they killed them, then that would be their revenge, basically. But they would not be. They would be guiltless. And that pretty much wraps it up. So that's the study on the Book of Numbers.